A lot of the people that were vending for us, they were people that were my interns, they were my people in my bands, they were, people that were all one degree of separation away that were involved in music. And then people that were their friends or people that were just fans of those bands would hear about, all the hardcore kids are selling t-shirts and stuff outside of Fenway, and they would come down and hang out. So we would be rolling with, 20, 25 people.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elliot Rana, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm so excited to welcome you to our event with Chris Wrenn, presenting his new book, Fenway Punk. He's joined in conversation tonight by Pat Flynn, lead singer of Bridge 9 band Half Heart, featured in tonight's book. In the early 2000s, Red Sox fans dreamed of finally crushing the rival Yankees. Chris Wrenn had a dream of his own, to start his own record label. But such an endeavor required money that he didn't have, until he and his friends heard a familiar phrase echo out of Fenway Park. Possessing the wherewithal to produce inexpensive merchandise and the free time to stake a claim to the sidewalks outside the stadium, Chris and his crew of punks began a lucrative endeavor selling Yankees Suck merchandise. While navigating cops, competitors, a violent gang, and infighting within the crew, Wrenn and his friends turned Boston's rivalry with New York into six-figure summers, affording him the capital to launch Bridge 9 Records and bring local Boston hardcore bands like American Nightmare and Have Heart to stages worldwide, just as the Red Sox got closer than ever to finally winning the World Series again. We're so pleased to host this event here at Harvard Bookstore tonight. Please join me in welcoming Chris Wrenn and Pat Flynn.
All right, we're gonna start this off kind of interview style, and it'll slowly become more of an interrogation, just as a heads up.
Jesse, grab a seat.
Staying hard. Thanks for having me, Chris. I appreciate it. Really, I owe a lot to this guy personally. I effectively have been to. I've had the opportunity to play music on every continent except for Antarctica. Because of him. Chris, I will just say, is a community builder and as much of a go-getter as of anybody I've probably ever met. I wasn't surprised to hear that during the pandemic he was like, basically, you were building a completely new place, right?
Yeah, just building a store and a venue and a place to do cool stuff.
Yeah, you were updating everybody on your social media. I remember just being like, Jesus, that guy's still going and won't stop. So I really appreciate you asking me to be here. Amongst being able to travel, I'm able to say that Ben Affleck wore my band's t-shirt largely because of Chris, and that made the Flynn family completely satisfied with their place.
It was all worth it.
In history. So I have, my first question is a little basic, but I'd like to know why'd you write this book?
Well, before we get started, for people that aren't familiar with this book, and everyone, thank you for coming out tonight. I know there's a lot of other things you guys could be doing, so I appreciate you being here. This book is about how both of my brands got started because of the rivalry with the Yankees. So it is called Fenway Punk. It is riffing on baseball and music, but you don't really have to be a fan of either to hopefully get the story and understand. It's really about like getting what you want and finding a way to do it. And I was able to find that way through opportunities at Fenway Park. But I wrote the book because, and this is all 20 years after the fact. This was mostly from the late 90s into 2004 when the spoiler alert, but the Red Sox won the World Series.
What?
Yeah. But it was a very important time, not only just for my brands and for music, but for a lot of the artists that we were working with at the time and a lot of the opportunities that bands like Have Heart had in the mid-2000s. So I wanted to just go back and tell that story. A lot of it had been stories that we told amongst friends, and people always appreciated it, but I wanted it fixed in a place that anyone could read it. So.
Yeah, there's like countless amounts of stories that I've heard over the years. One, we don't have to go into detail, but it involves the Italians. Is that in the book? I didn't come across
It is, yeah, yeah. Well, as you
Great
can imagine,
stories, selling point.
vending outside of Fenway Park
You
or
don't have to go into
or in anywhere, it gets very competitive, and sometimes people from the North End get involved, and you have to read the book to find out about how it happens.
It really is a bit of a journey. I've gone here and there, and there's some stuff I didn't even know. But it's a good read. That's also it. Like if you don't like punk rock or baseball, it's still like just a fun read. It's kind of strange. I think the first serious question is, do you like baseball?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm originally from Central Connecticut. I'm from the Red Sox side of the state. First time in Fenway Park was in 1986. I was a huge baseball fan as a kid, but then I discovered skateboarding and fell out of anything with organized sports. Just focused on skateboarding and punk rock and everything like that for many years. When I moved to Boston in the 90s, I was a mile away from Fenway Park, so you really couldn't escape that atmosphere. Friends of mine and I would all end up on Lansdowne Street, either because of games or because of some of the nightclubs, and where a lot of bands would play in the venues on Lansdowne. So it just really kind of sucked me back into it.
I wanted to ask that question because on the other side of things, my favorite song from one of the most important foundational hardcore punk bands, 7 Seconds. They have a song that I was really drawn to, and that song is called "I Hate Sports." My general impression of punk and hardcore was that it was like totally at odds with just sports. And for me, my experience was I just left because I sucked at sports. But I do think that there was something interesting about the nature of the Red Sox before they won the World Series. There was a feeling of loserdom, of the underdog. And I was curious if you thought that kind of underdog feel had any resonance, at least here up in New England, with hardcore punk kids.
Yeah, well, so I do reference that song, "I Hate Sports," in the book because, growing up in Central Connecticut, I mean, there was a very big gap between the punk fans and the jocks. I mean, it was a mile wide. In Boston, sports and music came in hand in a lot of ways. I mean, you have so many examples, whether it's bands like SSD Control, repping the Bruins, or obviously the Dropkick Murphys, and being connected to all the teams. But there was more of a connection between the two here that I didn't find in any other city. So it was just an opportunity to kind of tell the story about how both of those fans in a lot of ways are similar. And Red Sox fans in the 80s and 90s, you did feel like a loser sometimes, because there was such this, they were chasing something that they couldn't get. And I feel like with punk fans, oftentimes when you're the punk fan in your high school, you feel like an outcast, you feel like a loser sometimes, you feel like disconnected. And I think there was a lot of parallels between the two.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. My next question is, you have verified this was a successful endeavor. You didn't just not like the Yankees, think they sucked, and then sold some shirts for the playoffs in '99.
Yeah, I mean we did it for 17 years. It was.
I mean, and Ben Affleck's wearing your gear, that. There's been a lot of hawkers and peddlers throughout the years, but not all of them wound up, as successful as you. And my question is kind of a little bit more about that nexus between Red Sox and punk and hardcore. Why do you think this was successful with hardcore? not like the question isn't why isn't it successful and then because of hardcore, but like why do you think, like how did hardcore really kind of influence the success of like just making pretty crude shirts? Like why did that element like really kind of launch it to a successful endeavor?
So I started getting involved in the hardcore punk scene when I was a teenager, 14, 15 years old. And when you're involved in that scene, you see firsthand how the DIY ethic is so strong, and you see so many people just actively being involved. So, before I started doing anything on my own, I had friends that were doing record labels themselves, 7-inch labels, just doing singles and putting out records for their friends' bands, or doing fanzines, or if you were a photographer, you'd go take photos of bands at shows and give them to other zines and share them. Everyone seemed to really have a role. So I think for me it was seeing that firsthand and wanting to be involved. That was really the genesis of where this all started, was wanting to be like a part of the community and contribute. And so I started by starting Bridge 9 Records, and it was really in the 90s, it was just one record a year, all that I could kind of bootstrap with whatever money I could, scratch up. I mean, when Bridge 9 really started to kick off around 2000, I was working at Tower Records. I had a job that paid me $1 more than minimum wage as an artist doing window displays. So I was in no position to really be able to help a band beyond just maybe putting out one 7-inch single and just saying good luck. So looking for an opportunity to make more money, to be able to fund Bridge 9 is what put me at Fenway Park. And and I go into the book about how my friends and I, we would hear people. I mean, in the 90s, late 90s, you couldn't escape a Yankees suck chant. I mean, it was literally everywhere. Whether it was at a Red Sox game, it didn't matter who they were playing. I mean, especially if they were playing another team that didn't like the Yankees, it would be twice as loud, right? So, it got to the point where we realized this is an opportunity. Let's take this, generate money, and do whatever we can with it. But very, very quickly realized this is a much more lucrative business than putting out punk rock records. So, within a year or two of just kind of like selling stuff out of backpacks, it became a business, and it became something that actually was able to fund Bridge 9. I was going from one record a year to dozens. I think 2000, I'd put out three, I think. It was my first year where I had, 3 records. Then 2001, I had like a dozen. By 2005, I think I was putting out 20 records a year. And it was all because I was able to find the money that I needed through Red Sox fans.
Yeah, so I guess I got to thank the Red Sox for helping me
get
around the world.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing, they don't even realize it. I mean, there's people that are just walking, that had no idea that the money went into something as vital as punk rock bands.
Do you think, what was the impression of the Red Sox and their owners? Like, what was their impression of you guys? And did they like you? Because I remember being a kid going to games, and it wasn't a really family event. It wasn't like,
Have you been to a game recently? It's gotten a lot worse.
Oh, things are bad now?
Yeah, in terms of what people are selling.
Behavior?
T-shirts.
In terms of, like in terms of what? That's a good question. Do you feel responsible for for some of the crudeness? What I thought was super interesting, the book is great because it's like a cool element of history to it. But could you argue that New York kind of almost started this in a way in 1978? They would just have shirts that would say, Boston sucks.
Yeah, so that's something that I learned when I was researching this book. I thought that what my friends and I were doing was so smart, so unique. We're out here selling Yankee suck and Yankee hater T-shirts on the bridge next to Fenway Park. When I was doing research when I was writing this book, I learned about a pair of women that were doing the exact same thing that I was doing, selling Yankee hater T-shirts, the same slogan, everything, in the 70s. And I knew that the kind of headaches that I had to deal with, mostly with Red Sox fans in the early 2000s. I can't imagine what they dealt with, but they were doing it too. So, going into some of the research, I learned that they were a response to what was happening in the Bronx, and there was the original Yankees Suck T-shirt. The first one, as far as I know, was made by a Yankees fan, and so he was selling I Love New York T-shirts. He was a hawker, and he would sell them on the sidewalk on Fifth Avenue, and he would print them in his little print shop where he worked and sell these T-shirts. And
he was from the Bronx,
so yeah,
selling Yankee Suck shirts.
No. So let me go back even further. So
this guy seems cool. He's like in the zone.
In the 70s, apparently, Boston sucks was the slogan at Yankees games. And so they would chant this at games. And so this is where the negativity came from New York originally.
Wow.
And they would chant this. And this guy that was selling I Love New York T-shirts said, hey, I should...
To be clear, they're not saying a team sucks.
Yeah, it's the whole
city.
city.
They're saying the whole city sucks, just putting that out there. That's a bridge too far.
Yeah, so he got the idea to put this slogan on T-shirts, and he made a killing, sold a ton of these things. And when, in 1978, when the Yankees came to Fenway Park in what has since become known as the Boston Massacre series, he printed 1,200 Yankee Suck T-shirts, got 3 of his friends. They drove from the Bronx up and sold out of them by game 3.
So he was, let me get this straight. So he was selling Boston Suck shirts, and then he drove up to Boston and sold Yankees Suck shirts.
So he was playing both sides of the fence.
Nice.
Yeah, it cleaned up.
Did you ever go to New York and sell Boston Suck shirts?
I did not.
Okay, good. We'll find out. Did you ever think about that? Did you ever think maybe I should go to New York and sell
No, but I did do a book event in New York, and it went well. So.
For this book?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear. I'm glad there wasn't any tension. I think that kind of gets to my next question, which is why did Boston Sucks not take off, but Yankees Suck did? Is it just because your message was like an axiom of truth? Or I don't know. I'm just curious. New York's like a big happening city. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Why did Boston Sucks not? Thoughts?
So the gentleman in the 70s sold a lot of these T-shirts, and I think in the 90s
is Ben Affleck wearing a shirt?
No, he's not. He's not. I think that it just. When you were, the Yankees in the 70s, 80s, they had a lot of titles, right? They were in a position where it's almost like punching down at that point. I think Yankees Suck, I just remember, I feel like Yankees Suck united Red Sox fans in a way that, and I say this knowing that John Henry is a part owner of this bookstore, which was very cool to learn. Yankee Suck united Red Sox fans in a way that they later tried to do with Red Sox Nation. So Red Sox Nation was like an early 2000s, kind of like, hey, let's get all the Red Sox fans together. But that had already happened through hatred of the Yankees.
No kidding. All right. I got a quick one. Hawker or peddler? Which do you identify as?
Probably peddler.
Okay. Right. I just wanted to get that clear. What was the hawker or peddler scene like when you guys got there? Because I don't remember ever as a kid going to Fenway anything remotely close to people. There would be scalpers, but I just don't remember it. Maybe I have a bad memory here, but I would go to games all the time with my dad, and if you wanted to buy a shirt, you had to pay the big bucks, and inside there wasn't I don't know if you folks ever remember. Is there still a peddler scene outside?
There certainly is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you have that many people in one place, there's 38,000 people at every game. I mean, that's a lot of opportunity. And that was what we saw.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, wow, there's 38,000 people that like one thing a lot in one place. And, you know, normally in other cities, the stadiums are on private property. You know, they're set back and the parking and access to all that is restricted. But in Boston, it's, you know, they built the city around it. So it's like you can be right there in front of the stadium and sell. And we used a hawker and peddler license. It's a state license. I think it was like $62 for the year. Every city kind of has their own rules with how it can be used. And in the days before we even realized this, when we showed up for the first time, there were other vendors outside of Fenway. There already was a kind of established, you know, T-shirt business that was happening, and we disrupted it. You know, we showed up. I mean, there was groups of people doing it. You know, 3 here, 4 here, but we showed up with like 15 people and just kind of stuck a claim and disrupted you know, what was happening.
So there was like people were slinging shirts.
Yeah. I mean, people were selling T-shirts, and it's my understanding, going back into the late '70s, there were people vending on every part of the sidewalk for a period of time, and they ended up, I think, in like around '78, they ended up making all these new rules that kind of restricted people from being able to just sell hot dogs out of their car. You know, crazy things that I'd heard from code enforcement, you know, in the years since. So.
So there was like a bit of a hawker scene.
There was, and
in like the '90s, like the early '90s.
Yeah, I mean, ever since, you know, and when we first showed up in basically the spring of 2000, you know, there was a bunch of guys that were selling T-shirts and had enjoyed selling T-shirts for $20 a piece with no competition really. And at the time, my friend and my roommate started selling $10 Yankee Suck T-shirts and just undercut them, because I don't know if anyone remembered in the '90s, there was these guys, we called them, and I refer to them as the 21ers in this book, but they sold these navy blue Yankee Suck T-shirts. It said it across the shoulders, 21 for Roger Clemens on the back, Boston on the front, and it was an expensive shirt to make. I mean, it's, you know, it's three prints, that, you know, colors per side, you know, dark shirt. So a friend of mine said, you know, we could make this slogan and put it on a T-shirt for like $2. You know, just one color, the classic, just blue ink, white shirt. You know, basically, you know, cut their costs down to almost nothing, sell them for the half the price that other vendors were selling comparable T-shirts for, and just clean up. And so when we showed up, we really disrupted what was happening at the time. And it wasn't just the vendors, it was the code enforcement police that were just, you know like, who are you guys, and you know, why is there so many of you? Because even you know, we would have a dozen or 15 or so vendors, but we would also have all of our friends. You know, so a lot of the people.
All your friends are all hardcore kids.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people that were vending for us, they were people that were my interns, they were my people in my bands, they were, you know, people that were all one degree of separation away that were involved in music, and then people that were their friends or people that were just fans of those bands would hear about, oh, all the hardcore kids are selling T-shirts and stuff outside of Fenway, and they would come down and hang out. So we would be rolling with, you know, 20, 25 people.
I remember before I, you know, moved to Boston for college, I remember going through there and being like, that is the singer of In My Eyes. And he's got a big crew. It was huge. It was just massive. And to know that it was all rooted in punk and hardcore was like, so, as a teenager, I was like, this is crazy. And I couldn't believe it when, you signed my band, but also you gave me a job. One summer, emphasis on the one summer. I remember my location assigned was on Lansdowne under a bridge, and I made, I think it was $0 that first night.
So it was a very lucrative business, but it really depended
For some people.
on where you were set up. You know, and we had some people that worked for many, many years, and then we also had some people that worked one day and got arrested and then never came back.
Well, I didn't get arrested. I want to make it clear to the viewers at home. No, but I I think I liked the hang. The social atmosphere was so great. If you had nothing to do in the middle of the week, you get home from work, and you're like, I'll just go down to Fenway. Couldn't care less about the Red Sox playing, but all my crew of like 40 friends are all there.
That was the strength of it at that time, because a lot of the other vendors out there, they were all hustling, and it was a job for them, really. It was just, go in there and sell things. But for us, it was a social thing. It was our friends. We were hanging out. I mean, who doesn't love the atmosphere around Fenway Park? It's magical, right? I mean, I loved, even after I didn't have to necessarily be there all the time, I loved just going, because, you can't beat like a sunset, outside of Fenway Park, hanging out with your friends.
Flipping to more like the punk and hardcore side of things, for the unaware, Boston's had like an amazing history. It's in terms of punk music and hardcore music. It had, and it continues to have, like, it was booming in the early 80s, and then in the mid-90s, like, it kind of was a slight lull in the late 80s, but around 95, when you're starting to come onto the scene as well, it really has this, it has been persistently, like, just kind of on top of influence, and for what is, quite frankly, a global genre of music. And I'm curious if you like, to what extent you think, like, at least in that time, because it was like extremely booming. It was like every 2 or 3 years there was just like a new band that would just go across the country into Australia, into Europe and Latin America. How, like, do you think, like, in the way in which, like, hardcore is kind of like bringing a force to like some sports fandom? I mean, like, everyone was wearing Yankee Suck shirts. I remember one time I sold for Sweet Ink, and I couldn't believe it. I did sell for Sweet Ink. There was friendly competitors, but I sold one night, and this guy, I didn't make any money. Partly because this guy walks by me, and he goes, "I'm with Sully's," like as if he thought Sully was like a real guy or something like that. But I was like, well, that's some brand loyalty, and this was just a regular old, like, Boston Red Sox fan. So, like, in the way in which kind of like hardcore just really hit, like, and in a pretty world famous sports teams, like, kind of view, and how people viewed him, like the feeling of this kind of rivalry, underdog spirit. Like, I think my question is like do you think that era and that known association of like the Boston hardcore scene with like this whole Yankee Sucks Red Sox thing, like, in a meaningful way, do you think that in some way kind of like helped how people interpreted the Boston hardcore scene?
It's funny because we've put out more records, I think, with New York bands in the 30 years we've been a label than with Boston bands.
Huh.
It's kind of weird to think about, Yeah. But I mean, Boston and New York have had sports rivalries. They've had music rivalries. I mean, long before I was involved, there was rivalries between bands in Boston and New York City. And Yankee Suck was an opportunity to kind of, throw something back at them a little bit. We had H2O, when they did their music video, I had a Yankee Suck flag in my backpack, and they were doing a music video in New York City at a club. And they started talking about how it was kind of messed up that they're on a Boston label. The New York band, they're on a Boston label, and the label's funded by Yankee Suck money. So I ended up throwing the banner onto the stage, and they didn't know what it was. So Adam picked it up and like looked at it, and there's this great photo of him holding this Yankee Suck flag on a stage in New York City. But I think that with Boston fans and with the sports rivalry, a lot of people didn't know the connection between punk and sports. You know, I feel like I kind of, people in the know knew, but the average person didn't realize that there was such a connection back when we were doing it. So I don't know if there is a connection between, you know, our connection to sports and Boston being on top. But I know with music, I mean, you know, it is a city, much like you know, I'm originally from Connecticut. There's a lot of people that do come to Boston. They contribute to the music scene here. They create bands. You know, you've kind of got like the best of the best all ending up in one place and doing cool things. You know, I talk about American Nightmare. You know, Wes, the singer of American Nightmare, was my roommate, and he's on the cover of the book in this live photo. He was originally from Maine. That band, the whole band was from people from out of state. A couple guys from California, a couple from Maine. You know, but they came here, they met, they started writing music. And the thing that always struck me was that they started this band and started like riffing and writing songs in our basement, and literally from nothing, just put something together. And within a year, they were traveling to Europe, which was always just something that was incredible. I mean, just seeing bands like hardcore bands, like your band, you know, like just getting excited about something and then writing and putting I mean, you've always been such a great lyricist.
Thank you, Chris.
Putting that, you know, those words onto the page and then being able to travel the world with it.
Well, I will say, like, being like traveling while being on like a Boston representative of a Boston band, it did feel, I don't know, it felt like, you know, a big thing, because like it wasn't just a hardcore scene. It was there was this just like the hardcore scene's association with this culturally significant moment of like, I remember just seeing like old friends from high school or enemies from high school, and like I just always got a kick out of it, being like, you know, that it's a hardcore guy that started that, and you used to make fun of me for liking hardcore. Like it felt like a pretty powerful, meaningful, and significant force. And my sense was like it was added value to the Boston hardcore scene, because it was beyond that. It was hardcore kids, like truly kind of influencing mainstream culture in I would say in a serious and totally like fun way. Honestly, you know, it was a nice rivalry to take advantage of. I think one of my last questions is, so I teach history, and we explore in my history class this thing called social identity theory from this guy named Henri Tajfel. And his thinking is that, you know, like a social identity is like intensified, and the in-group is made that much more stronger, especially when they have an out-group, an adversarial out-group. And throughout history, oftentimes it seems to be the case that a third party will take advantage of that and exploit that kind of animosity. Do you feel like that third party in this case, recognizing a rivalry and then turning up the tension? You know, or do you feel like you turned up the tension, or was that kind of like, we really hate the Yankees? Like, was that feeling that you needed to put on your shirt, you needed to present to the world that the Yankees suck? Was that there, or did you and the crew like make that happen?
Well, so that desire existed amongst almost all Red Sox fans, but for us, for my friends and I mean, even as Red Sox fans, it really was just an opportunity. You know, we saw like, this is something that people, they're screaming it. I mean, and they still do it to this day. I mean, I was at a Danzig concert a couple of years ago, and there was a Yankee suck chant.
Did Danzig say that?
No, but I mean, like it just happened spontaneously. I mean, I remember going to Greatwoods for like Ozfest or something in the early 2000s, and there was a Yankee suck chant. You know, it was just this ubiquitous thing, and it still is. I mean, it's still happening. I mean, there's still people that are selling Yankee suck t-shirts outside of Fenway Park that have nothing to do with me. It's just kind of moved on to a new generation.
They sell Yankee suck stuff?
They do, yeah. Yeah, it's still it's
Cease and desist. Man.
no. I mean, for many, it's a proud tradition, and for me, it's cool to see that obviously carrying on. And it was something that we didn't create. It existed in many forms before us, but I think we just were in a right moment to really help popularize, kind of make it really popular. Just kind of like just run with it.
I got one more.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then we're going to pass it off. Is that timing wise, right? Okay. I think there's something powerful to the aesthetic of hardcore that people don't even really realize. Like in the font choice. When I remember seeing the Yankee Suck shirt for the first time, you're like thinking it was like a 10-yard fight t-shirt or something like that. Was that a conscious choice? Did you want the shirts to have that kind of hardcore, kind of youth crew like aesthetic? Because to me, when I see the shirt, I'm like, it's got the SSD type of like blunt, like font to it. It's very it's hard. So
yeah,
was that a conscious choice to kind of give it this kind of hardcore aesthetic out there?
So to speak to that, so the first 10-yard fight. I'm sorry, the first Yankee Suck t-shirt was made for a 10-yard fight show. So it was, 10-yard fight was a very important, at the time in the 90s, hardcore band in Boston. And when they were playing their kind of very much anticipated final show, friends made their own products, their own merchandise to kind of celebrate this moment. And a friend made that original Yankee Suck shirt, and it was the font that was chosen was so in the book I dedicate the book to a gentleman named Al Burrell. He was the singer, he was the guitar player of SSD Control, and their font is this very kind of like collegiate looking font, and that font has lived on and been used as a kind of a influence and reference point for a lot of people. But for the first Yankee Suck t-shirt, that font was chosen for Yankee Suck, and the shirt itself was based on an old punk fanzine. So like the kind of classic, Yankees with the big blue box with Suck knocked out. That's from an old fanzine called Boiling Point. So it was directly, influenced by something punk rock.
Nice, great. If there was the last thing if there was kind of like one takeaway from the story here, like that you would want, like that you would hope people wouldn't miss out on. What do you think that is for someone who sits down, maybe particularly, I would say for, how old were you when you really kind of put Bridge 9? Like were you like 19 or something like that? Yeah. 19. What would you want like a 19-year-old to take away from, after they read this book?
So one of the things that I think resonates with people, again, you don't have to be a fan of sports or music. If you want to do something and you're excited about something, don't let what you don't know stop you from doing it, because there was no guide to starting a record label for me. It was just something I had to figure out. I had to find people that, could help me, give me some advice here and there. But for me, it was really about just being passionate about something and then pursuing it and then finding ways to help pay for it. So
that's great. I think we're turning it over to some questions from the crowd.
It was interesting to, first of all, thank you for doing your part to abate the American literacy crisis. It's a lovely book, an actual book you hold in your hand. Please read it. I read it a few times. It's cool because you can read it through a few different lenses. And so I'm looking at it through this marketing, creator, strategist lens. And I was thinking a lot of, you talked about the kind of culture jamming and street art that you did as far as with graffiti, the reappropriating the MBTA advertisements. And I was wondering as far as that and the idea of artistic risk, what do you see, or what have you kind of observed with not just changes things are digital, but as far as the spirit of marketing? I think some of that still kind of exists, but now zines are not that uncommon, printed fanzines or zines are not that uncommon to include in merch bundles and to give music consumers and like art consumers like a different experience. But as far as like with marketing, like we're not gonna ask you to jump on any more bridges or anything like that. But as far as the creativity and the creative risk in like the current marketing world, like what do you make of that, if anything?
So I mean, at 50 years of age now, like I am rooted in physical. I'm rooted in things that are real. Obviously appreciate digital marketing, digital promotion, but when I started Bridge 9, I had no money. I mean, I mentioned, I had a low-paying job, so like in order to promote myself, I had to find ways that were free. And in a lot of ways, it was kind of leaning on my graffiti background and finding opportunities to kind of insert Bridge 9 back then into the environment so that people would see it and it would be cost effective for me. So, I mentioned in the book how I was going to places like the MBTA and the trains. They have these signs and they're like these 2-foot square advertisements. So I took one from one of the trains and went back to my job at Tower Records and started designing advertisements in that size and printing them out and sliding them back in. So I spent one night, going on all the trains and sliding these Bridge 9 ads into these little frames. Or doing things like, changing billboards. I mentioned in the book there was this, and this is in the late 90s, there was like this Got Milk campaign. For people that remember the Got Milk campaign, they had one with Garfield, and it said 9 nutrients, 9 lives, and my record company name is Bridge 9, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna hijack this billboard, and pasted Bridge 9 with a question mark over the Got Milk sign. And it was ridiculous, and most people I think that saw it had no idea what that was even referencing or meant. But doing things like that helped get me my first record kind of music business job. So somebody that ran a really, really cool independent record label in the 90s here in Boston called Big Wheel Recreation saw these kind of guerrilla marketing opportunities that I was, things that I was doing, liked it and offered me a job. So, at a time when I really didn't know what I was doing with my own record label, I was just guessing things and trying things and putting out these releases one at a time. Now I had somebody that was willing to help me, kind of like steer me, I guess, and kind of show me how to do things a little bit more, not professionally, but like just, I guess, in a way that were more helpful. And so by putting myself out there and doing things physically, it led to opportunities that, opened new doors for me.
That was a great question. It spilled off onto me. We saw Bridge 9 everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, it's just everywhere. I remember spending summers you would give us massive amounts of stickers. We go around not just Boston and Massachusetts, we go around the country just putting it absolutely everywhere.
I was making stickers that were like this big. And I was like, well, how can people not miss this?
There was a roll. It was like an industrial size, toilet paper roll of just stickers. And people, I think Andrew from Strife recently sent me a picture of, in Europe, one of those stickers from 2006 that you gave us. We were around the world. You were always big on the physical.
There's one of them on the awning for CBGB that's in the Hall of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
A half art sticker?
Yeah.
That's great.
This is a question for Chris. I want to hear a story, or I have a memory of the 2004 World Series win. And I remember your crew being tactical about how you were approaching this very large crowd of people. I heard that you were hiding T-shirts in dumpsters because you were worried about the crowd being in here or getting confiscated.
We would do stuff like that, not so much for the crowds, but for code enforcement. So I mentioned them, and I refer to them as the Codies in the book. But the code enforcement are the police that have a detail around Fenway Park, and they're in charge of basically stopping street vending that when it's not permitted. And our permits were good. So we talk about the hawker and peddler license. Those are those allow you to sell things door to door basically, but they're not meant for like stationary vending, and they're only good from really weird hours. In Boston, they're only good from 8 p.m. at night to 8 in the morning, because they don't want you competing with brick and mortar vendors. So we would typically only legally be able to sell after 8 p.m., which is coinciding with the crowds leaving, so that's usually pretty good. But you want to also get that crowd, especially on a Sunday, afternoon game, going in, and you want to be able to make money then. So we would hide merchandise. We would have, a person with a bunch of it around the corner, and then you would only have a little bit, so that if code enforcement caught you, you would only lose a part of what you had, and you could just go back around the corner and do it again elsewhere. So yeah, we would kind of have things hidden away just in case. And this is also around the same time where I'd have a backpack with like a different colored hat and a different color sweatshirt, if I had to, do a quick change.
You mentioned the funniness of seeing somebody wearing a Yankees Sucks shirt and not knowing it's a hardcore thing. Like, I feel like I took that to the max. I would be wearing my Yankees Sucks shirt that my dad bought me while like talking shit on the Bridge 9 forums.
Yeah.
And having no idea, which is really funny looking back now that I've learned about all this. You mentioned, Boston and New York have rivalries in multiple sports. Like, what do you think about it is about the specific nature of baseball that really lended itself to this type of moment, as opposed to maybe other sports?
Well, I mean, it definitely exists in football and hockey and in other sports, but I think something that I realized with Sully's, after we became, originally we were just the I hate the Yankees guys, right? And we wanted to be more than that, especially, the market clearly changed, in 2004. It wasn't as cool to, hate on the Yankees at that point, because, we won, and we had embarrassed them in, like stunning fashion. But even before that, humiliated them. In 2001, of course, with 9/11, and I talk about that in the book. You could not say a bad thing about New York for months, and that was right in the fall when we were trying to sell, Yankee Suck merchandise. And in 2001, I had 8 new releases on Bridge 9 come out in the same month. So I had something like $50,000 that I needed, and that was right when 9/11 happened. So for us, it was realizing like, wait, we shouldn't have all of our eggs in one basket. So we need to start focusing on things that are more about repping your home team and less about, crapping on the rivals. So, in 2004, when I registered the trademark for Believe in Boston, the idea was to just focus on, repping Boston and not just, talking smack.
Very evolved.
Yeah. There's an arc of growth in this.
So speaking of arcs of growth, in the book you really tell this narrative of how you go from hustling outside Fenway Park, being chased around by the Codys, the team can't be thrilled about what you're doing out there, to actually building a relationship with the team, having them rep your merch. You kind of go from this outsider to like almost being like an insider in some ways. And so just looking back at the history of all this, bunch of hardcore hooligans running around outside Fenway hawking this stuff, I can't imagine that that's a story that the team has kind of historically been willing to embrace. And you kind of alluded to this earlier when you mentioned that John and Henry partially owns this bookstore. What's kind of the response been, now that you have this book out, the story's out in the open, what's the response from the team been like? Do you see them embracing the story more moving forward? Do you see that relationship changing? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So that remains to be seen. We're still working to explore opportunities to collaborate. We've had a few things here and there, which has been really nice. But one of the things that we learned was that nobody with the Red Sox liked what we were doing, 25 years ago. But over time, people that did like what we were doing went on to be in positions of influence. And so things have softened, and of course we also evolved. And so I think as we were changing our brand and being, a little less rough around the edges, I guess, we found kind of a middle ground where we were able to coexist. In 2015, we started working with the Jimmy Fund and worked with them for a couple of years. Great organization. But I remember when we first started working with them, the woman that was in charge of their corporate sponsorships said, you know, I have one of your shirts from when I was in college. You know, she was in her 30s. She said it was our "Take Your 26 Rings" T-shirt and kind of shove them. Definitely a very descriptive, one of our, you know, kind of edgier shirts at the time. But she said, I had that shirt. I bought it when I was in college, bought it on the bridge, probably from me or one of my friends. And she said, I can't even fit in it anymore. I can't wear it anymore, obviously, but I'm never getting rid of it. And now she was the one that was in charge of basically who was kind of gatekeeping who was and who wasn't working with the Jimmy Fund. Funny story about the Jimmy Fund too. When we first started working with them, we would give an annual donation to the Jimmy Fund as part of kind of our paying it forward, you know, because every year, especially during their telethon, we would give them, you know, a donation. And in 2014, I think it was, I made a ceremonial check for our donation and just went down to Fenway Park and just walked right up. I mean, I'm not advising anyone do this, but if you walk up with a large ceremonial check, they'll let you right in. So they're like, hey, you've got a big check, come on in. So I just walked right in, and there was, the whole team was there, and I took photos with the check and people, you know, members of the team, and it was great. But somebody from the Jimmy Fund was like, who are you? It's like, I'm from Sully's. You know, we were making a donation. She's like, yeah, I mean, you can't do that. And apparently, you can't, as a business, just donate money really and say it's to the Jimmy Fund. They have very specific rules. You have to be a sponsor, and you have to, in order to even mention the Jimmy Fund. I did not know that. So, but it got my foot in the door, literally, and I was able to start working with them for the next couple of years. So that is an example of doing something physical and just putting yourself out there.
Awesome. Well, the last question I really want to ask was inspired by your idea. When the movie is eventually made, who do you want to play you? And do I have a place in this film? Because I'm in the book, and I mean, people have said, you know, Casey Affleck and I kind of have
maybe so the problem though is we were all in our 20s.
That's true.
And I mean, you're how old now?
I'm about 25 now.
25 now. Nice. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know who's in there like 23, 24, 25. That would be a good person, but
you can see like a young Timothy Chalamet. You know.
So somebody mentioned that at one of the earlier readings that I did, and then somebody else said no, not him. So I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you folks for coming out. We'll see you at the movie showing of Fenway Park.
Yeah. Thank you.